Hello, my name is Erica, and I'm the Dyslexic Trekkie. As with the history of Captain Janeway, the bulk of my information is gathered from Memory Alpha. Anything else is from my personal memory from watching the different series. The Klingons are, if not the oldest, then one of the oldest aliens in Star Trek outside of the Vulcans. In this video, I will discuss their portrayal throughout the franchise. I will discuss their culture and why they appear to be so homogeneous, and if I think this is an inaccurate portrayal. Klingons go back to the original series and looked essentially human, aside from slightly copper skin. From what was seen in the original series, Klingons were little more than mustache-twirling villains. They were antagonists primarily because their values were antithetical to those of the Federation. From a writing standpoint, Klingons were used as a true villain, a convenient trope when writing. Need a bad thing to happen? Klingons did it. A planet has tech they shouldn't have? Klingons gave it to them. Someone is causing trouble for the sheer spite of it? Those pesky Klingons are at it again. On the surface, the culture appears to be similar to the feudal system of Japan. It's really more accurate to say the culture was based on the European misconception of feudal Japan. In the original series, Klingons are brutes. There's no mention of honor, just conquest. There's no diplomacy, and no concept of dying an honorable death. But they didn't have to have that. Klingons represented the worst part of humanity. They interfere with the development of cultures for their own benefit. They take what they want from a planet, then exploit the inhabitants for a workforce. They may have done a poor job of portraying Japanese culture, but they managed to depict European colonial culture perfectly. As the movies came in, the depiction of Klingons began to evolve, first with the brow ridges, and more samurai-style clothing. They weren't quite what we see in The Next Generation, but they were getting there. It was clear Klingons were still just the mustache twirlers. They just had crinkled brows to match. Once on The Next Generation, the Klingons are both more noble and more warlike. But more importantly, we have an individual we relate to who is a Klingon. Worf changed everything when it comes to Klingon identity. He had a kind of controlled savagery in the beginning. We even hear him growl from time to time. But over time, we saw his identity come through. He wasn't a noble savage. He was a man of honor. Because he was raised by humans, he found it important to stay connected to his identity by embracing his culture in its entirety. We learn he's not just Worf. He's Worf, son of Moog, a noble house whose leader died with honor. The concept of Klingon honor wasn't wholly new, but Worf made it mean something. He also brought in the concept of the warrior, a noble fighter bringing glory to the Empire, though in his case, it's bringing it to the Federation. Much of his character development comes from him trying to find a place for his culture in a mostly human society. In Star Trek VI, The Undiscovered Country, we hear a philosophy relating to honor that seems to imply any Klingon, no matter the job, can be a warrior with honor. The concept, as I've heard it described, is that you can be a janitor, a toilet bowl maker, anything. So long as you do your job to its fullest, you have honor. The problem is, that's not what we really see. Klingons are warriors. With rare exception, they are men and women who fight in battle for plunder. They look for kills, are cunning, and fight to win. And by fight, we mean war. Here's the issue. The franchise of Star Trek is based on following a military, albeit a military of science and exploration, but still a military nonetheless. It's only natural for their interactions with other races to be primarily with their government's military. So I'd like to explore a few times we see people who aren't affiliated with the military, at least not directly. The first I'd like to talk about is the wife of Martok. The best way to describe her is a Klingon Kardashian. She is the most important woman in her family, and she's dripping with aristocracy. She's proud of her family line and clearly shows a strong sense of the upper-class ideology. Even though Martok makes it clear he's from a lesser house. Yes, he's military, but she's nothing of the sort. The same goes for Quark's ex-wife Grilka. She's not a warrior. She's running her household. And we know this isn't because women can't be warriors. We see female Klingon warriors. These are people who choose another path. But these are people in some way associated with the warrior class. I'd like to move on to those who seem to have never had any association with battle. There's the Klingon restaurant owner. I had a good time trying to find his name. I couldn't find it anywhere, so if someone knows his name, please share it in the comments below. He is just known as the Klingon chef, which is a shame. The character is just in the background of the show, more or less, but a nice reminder that DS9 isn't that far from the Beta Quadrant. He's also every bit a Klingon. He may just be serving food, but he does it with the same kind of flair as you might expect from a warrior giving orders on a battlefield. Moving on, Kurak is a Klingon scientist in Sunscope from The Next Generation. She was willing to listen to Roiga, a Ferengi scientist who had theories which would, if true, allow a ship to travel into the top layers of a star. The episode makes it clear that the Klingon society doesn't think as highly of its scientists, which leaves her somewhat defensive. It may seem to go against my theories in the culture, but we forget that these are cultures. People within a culture are not homogeneous. We see one aspect of the society most, the military. But a society has factioning, no matter how idealized it is. This warrior race will likely put a priority on actual combat, leaving those who find honor in more intellectual pursuits defensive about their path. The thing I want to ask is something I think is most relevant when talking about Klingon ideology. If you ask any of these individuals if they were headed to Sto-vo-kor or Grethor, where the Dishonored go, I think they'd say Sto-vo-kor, and then make a show of how offended they are by the question. Of course, these are all people living honorable lives by their interpretation of the Klingon way. There is one exception, Kalest, Worf's childhood nursemaid. I saved her for last for a reason. You really can't get further from the concept of a warrior than a nursemaid. The woman had nothing to do with conquest or battle. She tended to Worf and his brother when they were babies. Yet later in life, she's found living in shame on Kronos. Why? Because she didn't die protecting Worf and his brother Kern. She can defend the memory of Worf's father, but won't at first, because she would have to come out into the open. In the story, she states that she is dead, because she survived Khitomer. I think she's the only one in this group who might have a less certain answer to the question of her afterlife. She is a shamed and broken woman. The counter to this is, even a nursemaid can live a courageous and honorable life. Here's my point. If the attitude of, if you're not a warrior, you're basically a slave to the Empire, is to be believed, then this woman would have no honor to lose. She's a servant to a warrior's house, not one herself. The fact that she can be shamed in this way shows that she could have been honored in the same situation. This is something I'd like to revisit in a Star Trek Minute sometime in the future. But for now, I'd like to conclude with this. I think Chang had it right when he said honor was something any Klingon could strive for. Their culture is one that prioritizes the battle as a place of honor, but there's hints throughout the franchise that battle isn't just something one does when fighting an enemy to the death. From a story standpoint, I think we can easily say that the previous depictions of Klingons came more from the perceptions of those only observing enemies from a distance. Then, from those who had been deeply hurt by Klingons who could have easily gone rogue or acting against an enemy they saw as a genuine threat to their way of life. Not that people demonizing outsiders whose culture is different than their own has anything to do with modern times. Thank you for watching. If you have any thoughts, feelings, ideas, or if there's any point you think I missed, please share in the comments below. My name is Erica, and I'm the Dyslexic Trekkie. I'm sorry, but there will be no outtakes today. I create these videos when I have a chance, but I often record them far in advance, so I can work on editing when I have time. Because of that, I had the video up well before everything in Ukraine happened, but it wasn't seen until after. At first, I wasn't sure what I could do. I don't really have a platform yet, so a fundraiser feels more useless than anything. I make nothing for this yet, so I can't donate profits to anything. So instead, I'd like to do this. If by any chance someone in Ukraine or from Ukraine sees this now or in the future, please know your plight matters. You're in my thoughts and those of many others. I hope this ends well with your nation intact. I hope those being arrested for protesting in Russia are safe and find their way back home as well. And I hope this harms Putin as deeply as possible, and I hope his tyranny is stopped. Please be safe. And if anyone watching this can donate to any cause to help refugees, please do so.